without further ado, since we had a few technical difficulties, I want to introduce our first speaker. Dr. Bethany Theiling is a friend and colleague of mine, also works at NASA Goddard, and she is working on how to use AI for astrobiological purposes on real missions. And those of us in astrobiology, that's one of our prime targets is how do we have assistance to go to other planets? Bethany's area of focus, of course, is the outer icy bodies and the potential for life there. So Bethany, if you're on, let me turn it over to you.
All right, thanks, Benny. I think if you all can do it, then it won't back into my ear. That'd be great. All right, hopefully that works. Yeah, thank you so much. First of all, I wanted to thank you. Thanks to the IT group and the AV group for setting this up, and I really appreciated that this was a challenge. So I really appreciate you guys working with me so that I can actually present today. And thanks to the organizers for inviting me. I'm very, very sad that I wasn't able to physically be there, but I'm really excited to be able to present this work to you all. This is pretty much hot off the presses. We've been doing this for a few years kind of in quiet while we got this going. And so I'm gonna basically kind of guide you all through the process that we've taken to kind of get here. And really the goal here is that we're trying to develop actually one of the panelists in the previous panel was discussing this. There's a lot of this like model development, but then how do we use those models? And so basically we're trying to create the framework that would enable people to use whatever bespoke model you have through an artificial intelligence framework. And particularly we're trying to do this on board. So again, my name is Bethany Theiling. I'm a research scientist at NASA Goddard Space Flight Center. And I'm here right outside of Washington, D.C. It's just after 10 a.m. Let me get my timer going just so that I can have a sanity check here. All right. So the agenda for today, I've got a lot to go over. So I kind of want you to see where I'm going. So why do we want this at all is the first thing. I'll kind of talk about the case study that we used for this, and as Penny mentioned, my primary focus is on icy ocean worlds, such as Europa and Enceladus. Then I'll go into the demonstration. So this is it's a pre-recorded demonstration of how the AI works, but I'll walk you through it. We did this because it would just take a lot of time, and I don't have too much time to share with you. And then I'll talk briefly about how you could implement this into your workflow and your mission. And then what are we working on now and future plans? So why do we want to onboard AI for ocean worlds and astrobiology specifically? So this morning, I guess for you guys it's this afternoon by this point, we've been talking, and I heard a lot of great talks this morning about how you can use this for data-rich experiences. Well, for planetary science in general, and certainly for the astrobiology community, we don't have a lot of data to work with. And so there's a few challenges that we need to kind of overcome. And so hopefully you guys can see this thing at the top here. So we have the challenges for outer solar system missions, which are the ones that I'm really focused on, have to do a lot with latency. How do we talk to our spacecraft? And so, this is just a model of the solar system. You didn't notice I left Pluto off of this. You're here, at least I think that's where everybody is today. I don't know where everybody else is joining us. And so I think about a lot about the moons of Jupiter and Saturn. And so even to get to Jupiter, it takes just the speed of light. It'll take you about 35 minutes to send a message to Jupiter. If we get to Saturn, it's getting around 1.2 hours. And of course, this gets worse and worse as you go into the outer solar system. The real challenge here is not just that delay, but then you have to, on top of that, think about where's the position of the spacecraft relative to Earth, or relative to some sort of relay station. We don't have a lot of those assets out in the solar system. NASA is trying those sorts of things out. But this is a real challenge. So, and I'm just giving I'm going to pick on Europa a little bit because I know a lot about Europa. But for the flyby mission that's coming up, the Europa Clipper mission that's going to launch in October, I'm so excited. it's about 8 hours to have a message that comes one way. And this is a flyby mission. Now, if you were to land on the surface of Europa, it could be upwards of 43 hours, depending on where the position of the moon is relative to Jupiter and Earth, and of course the sun. So it could be on the other side, actually. So this is a huge challenge. So if you think about, it takes a long time to get out there. It takes a long time to communicate. We don't have the ability to sort of redirect in real time. And you add to that the challenges, and I think many of our scientific colleagues that I'm sure are in the room or online, we have this challenge of when we get the data back, it takes a while to think about that data, to process it, and to actually consider what it means. But if we're thinking about an astrobiological detection, a life detection, the real challenge to me, and the thing that I would not want to miss out on, is what if we saw something that could be life, and that was our only opportunity? Just because that's how luck works sometimes. And I think one of the talks this morning was talking about, or this afternoon was talking about this like we learn a lot of things that we didn't know before, and so we want to make sure that we take advantage of being out there, and that's really where AI can help. So, and I'm gonna focus kind of on the icy ocean worlds and biosignatures here. So I want to give you this view, and maybe some of you have seen these pictures of the surface of Europa. Maybe you haven't. Maybe this is the first time you've ever seen this. But one of the things I think about, and I'm going to use hopefully you guys can see my cursor, these bands here, these cracks in the surface, and this section over here is called chaos terrain. So these are overturned blocks, and these are actually like flexure points that we think actually opened up. Some of these are actually subducting, similar to Earth's tectonic plates. And so this is an actively tectonic system. It's ice, so it's all ice. This is not rock. But we've never observed this happening in the solar system. And so we've taken pictures of it, and we have evidence that it does happen. But what if we could be there? What if we could respond in real time? So if you start to see a flexure of that icy crust, in any direction using one of your instruments, even a magnetometer, as one of the participants put up this morning. What if you could respond to that? The other thing is that, especially in Europa, we don't know if there are active plumes. There's a lot of work that suggests that there could be plumes, but other people do not agree. This is actually some recent detections by JWST. This is the James Webb Space Telescope. This is not a plume, but it is carbon dioxide ice that's on the surface of Europa. So this kind of lends credence to this idea that maybe there are like volatiles that are being ejected into space, similar to Enceladus. So how could you react to that in real time? And I think you'd have to have AI. And then, of course, the most exciting one, I think, to many people is, could you react to a potential biosignature? So if you saw something that was interesting, and this goes into the anomaly detections, it's been a lot of the conversation today, could you respond to it? And then I like to put this up here because sometimes we don't know what we don't know until we're presented with something new. And so I call this opportunistic science. So how would we be able to, again, respond to something that maybe we didn't know that we wanted to look for? We can plan all we want, but there's so many things that we learn once we're actually out there. So we actually worked on this case study. So basically, we built a lot of machine learning models, many kinds of machine learning models, and then I really started to push on this idea of, could we do something with them? Like, how do we get these on board? How do we do this? Can it be more than a tool for a scientist on the ground? Could it actually fly? And I've talked a lot about Europa already, so Europa's up here. And Enceladus is down here. We decided to focus on Enceladus because a lot of the mission priorities upcoming are on Enceladus. And I'm going to give a brief introduction to Enceladus. I don't want to steal Chris Glein's thunder. He's giving a talk next. He will talk probably a lot more about Enceladus. But this is a beautiful picture of the surface of Enceladus. So this is near the South Pole, and you can see that it's ejecting these particles out into space. So it's a lot of water. It's mostly water, carbon dioxide. There's salt, actually. So the composition so far seems to be very much like Earth's ocean. So it has sodium chloride and sodium bicarbonate. There's things like gases like methane and hydrogen, which is very exciting. I'm sure Chris is going to talk about it. Organics, which is also super exciting because organics, of course, are the building blocks of life, at least here on Earth. And then things like silica, which maybe Chris will talk about, that gives us evidence for hydrothermal processes happening at the seafloor. And just to give you a sense of scale here, because I think it's really important, Enceladus's plumes are enormous. And you can see here's Enceladus. This is actually a Cassini giving a long gaze backward. This is its last picture of Enceladus before it dove into Saturn. And you can see the plumes are ejecting upwards of 200 kilometers out to space. They're huge. And then Old Faithful, so this is one of the Earth's largest geyser. It's in Yellowstone National Park in the United States. And so you can see it's, maybe 0.6 kilometers. So these bars here, so this is just a scale. This is Enceladus's plume, and here's this teeny little dot, which is actually too big still to indicate the size difference in these things. So these are enormous. And we had the good fortune of being able to fly through them with the Cassini spacecraft. Cassini also was able to take a lot of data here. So you got these like warm bands. I'm going to say warm in quotes because, and I put these temperature estimates at the bottom here. So negative 135 degrees Fahrenheit is probably the warmest, but this is the surface. This is not underneath the ice. And then about negative 330 degrees Fahrenheit out here, and you have Kelvin here as well. This image over here on the right-hand side is actually, these are the unique detections of plume activity, the unique sources of plume activity. As of 2008, there's been many, many of these. This was just a helpful diagram. And so from all this, we've been able to come up with this profile, this model of what the interior of Enceladus should look like. And you can see it has this ice shell. It's about 5 kilometers thick, give or take. There's a lot of work on estimating this, and people sort of range or vary on how they have the thickness of these. There's also these, what we think, and I think Chris will probably talk a little bit more about this, but we have evidence to support the idea that there are these rock-water interactions at the seafloor, and these are called white smokers, and that's based on the chemistry that we see in the plume. So this is just an example of these white smokers that we have here on Earth. And you can see it's a very, very deep ocean. So it's 65 kilometers thick, the ocean. That's very, very deep. And of course, we have these cracks that kind of go through the surface and be ejected here. Now, a lot of the work, again, that Chris Glein has done and his colleagues, they've suggested that there's enough chemical energy to support microbial life, which makes this a really exciting target. And this is one of the reasons why we decided to focus on it. So a lot of the work that I do and the group that I'm in here at NASA Goddard is in developing mass spectrometers for spaceflight. So I'm going to give you just a brief overview of how a mass spectrometer works so that at least you have a sense of like what kind of data I'm looking at. So the sample enters here. It actually gets, in whatever form, we usually try to make sure that it's a gas by the time it enters a mass spectrometer. They don't like water. They don't like salt either, turns out, which is going to be challenging later on. But basically, that gas enters into an ionization source. It ionizes, so it basically gets energetic, like it's an energetic particle or group of particles. Those particles are now accelerated. They interact with a magnet, and when they interact with that magnet, they actually get bent, and they separate out based on their weight. And so things that are very, very heavy can't get deflected as much, and so they are detected here. And these lighter mass ions get deflected a lot, and so they tend to be diverted a lot. So that's the basic idea of a mass spectrometer. I'm going to show you all. So these are, hopefully they will play. Go. It may not be working. That's too bad. So basically what I'm trying to show you guys here is these mass spectra that should be here. So you'll have the mass over charge on this axis and then the intensity on this y-axis here. I'm not entirely sure why they weren't showing. Everything worked up until apparently right now. But what you should be able to see is that there are these pretty distinct peaks here in each of these. And what I was hoping to show you is that these are very, very, very different, but also very simple because these are one molecule, one kind of molecule. And so that tends to be pretty easy. And there's very easily we can create machine learning models or even statistical models that show you the differences between those two things. We don't need a lot of intelligence for that. Now, things get more challenging when you have salt in it. And like I said, mass spectrometers don't really like salt. So here's the kind of spectra that you might see. And I really wanted you to see the simple spectra so that you could see what we start out with and then what we actually end up with. So this is just a solution that has sodium chloride, just like other solutions, in it. You can see that it tends to ionize in really weird ways. And then if you add organics into it, it gets really complicated. So this is the perfect kind of problem. Could we identify, so basically my group initially started several years ago working on, could we extract information from these really complicated spectra that could help us identify not only life versus non-life, but also just the chemistry of an ocean. So that's kind of what we worked on. So I'm just going to show you, like, this is the low-hanging fruit kind of work that we were like, we should start here, and then we've gotten a lot more complicated. So just to show you that kind of spectra again, this is a really simple version of it. So one of the things that would be super simple to implement, you don't need a machine learning model for this, would be things like the limit of detection or limit of quantification. And so could you actually say, all right, well, this is where I know that my instrument is actually making a detection and not just, noise. And now you have a feature, so maybe it's something interesting, or even you could set your threshold upwards through a novelty or an anomaly, as we heard earlier. Or is it something I've never ever seen before? So it could be that too. So basically, I'm so upset that none of my animations are shown. This is really, really upsetting, actually. Mostly because you won't be able to actually see anything work in real time. Let me just see if I can have it work here. Yes, it would be great. Not play media. Okay. Oh, that is really too bad. Okay. Well, we'll work with it anyway. So what you should be able to see is that there are 8 spacecraft that are orbiting Enceladus. And I want to be very clear, this is not a mission concept. So we wanted to come up with a very, very complicated scenario that would basically be impossible to work with. And so we had 8 small sats that were orbiting around Enceladus. I have it rotated so you can see the South Pole where those really cool cracks are that have the geysers. And so one of the things that we wanted is these cones here should be showing you that there are these, that at least you could view the South Pole even if you couldn't fly over it. So it's not a stable orbit to actually fly over the South Pole. And again, this would be a really great animation if it was actually working. I think Zoom doesn't like this for some reason. So here, what we decided to do, what we also really realized that we needed to do is model the communication pathways. Because if you're going to have an intelligent constellation that can respond to something in real time, then you need to figure out, well, when and how can the spacecraft communicate with each other? And so what you would be able to see if this was able to work is that you would see that those spacecraft are orbiting and then how their communication pathways can change. So who can talk to who at any one moment. A lot of the data that we used are based on laboratory simulations. So the idea is that we know if there's these rock-water interactions at the seafloor, you should have these gases that are kind of moving through the system. We can measure them here very easily using those mass spectrometers. And so this is what those experiments look like. I made fake seawater. Sometimes I put microbes in them. And then we measured the CO2 that interacted with those microbes or just the seawater. And we were able to create a lot of machine learning models. And again, I'm really sad that you guys can't see this. Basically, there's this console. I'm not sure how I'm going to deal with the next slide, but there's this console that we developed that it's using a platform called Redis. And so we have 3 consoles. So you have Spacecraft 2, we were just focusing on a smaller demonstration for you all. So Spacecraft 2, Spacecraft 1 is in here in the middle, and then the mothership. In this particular case, we decided to have some sort of like data relay system that can communicate back and forth. If this was able to work, then what you would see is that this is actually working in real time. And so this spacecraft was preparing to take a measurement. It started that measurement, and it's then communicating that back and forth between these. This is the one that's truly upsetting because it's really exciting to show all of you. But basically, if this was able to play, you'd see that we have, I think at this point, we have upwards of 30 machine learning models that have been inputted into the system. All of those models have to collaborate, come up with basically an opinion about what they think the data is. And so they're seeing this analysis in real time. They're able to talk about, like, basically communicate amongst themselves, all of those particular machine learning models, and then the consensus approach, or the majority agreement would be, hey, we think we found this. What should we do now? And so again, I'm very sorry to say that you guys can't see this. Just going to see if there's any way that this will play. Let's just see. Oh, so upsetting. Okay, it just won't play at all. Okay. Yeah, but the exciting part about this is that we've actually demonstrated that using randomly generated, basically randomly called data from our data flow, so you can actually look and see, it seems to think that there's a particular probability that this is a biosignature, and because it was a pretty high probability, it was asking for follow-on analyses. And those follow-on analyses were then communicated to the mothership and back and forth between a couple of spacecraft. They came to a decision that they actually had the onboard resources and the time necessary to do that, and they redirected the spacecraft so that, or they repointed the spacecraft so that it could actually take a new measurement. And so this is the kind of technology that would really enable new missions. So I'll end with, I know I'm running out of time here, or out of time, so I'll end with, we built this as an entire system so that it should take in information about the spacecraft, about fault detection, about its navigation and guidance. It should be able to transfer systems, knowledge across systems. It should be able to manage its mission constraints, so you can hard code those things in. We're also building it so that these are modules, so that you could basically say, I don't have the onboard computing resources to do all of this, but I would like data prioritization, and that would be something that would be really helpful for my particular mission. Or I would like the intelligent sensing and response. And so that's really how we're trying to work that through. So what are we working on now? Super quick. We're trying to make really more complicated decision making, deploy it with hardware, and then conduct field tests. And so these are actually, these two guys over here on the right are my two summer interns. This is my graduate student, Lily, and then one of the CS professors at the University of Tulsa I work with. And they actually were doing this summer, so we're actually trying to build machine learning models out in the field in real time, which is really cool. And then hopefully we'll deploy in space very, very soon. So with that, thank you very much. And again, apologies that you all couldn't see all of those amazing videos. And I'm happy to stick around and answer some questions.
Thanks, Bethany.